Grace and peace, and spoiler alert for the movie Peninsula, or as it premiered in the US, Train to Busan presents Peninsula. It is the sequel to Train to Busan, which was a zombie movie I really liked, and it was one of the only movies that was showing in theaters in that brief window when theaters came back open when we thought we had the corona whooped. So I went to see it in a big empty theater with a mask on. And man, it's interesting to watch movies about pandemics in the middle of a pandemic. But this one was a zombie pandemic. In Peninsula, it actually has a lot in common with Zombieland 2, which you can watch up here. Zombieland 2 was one of the first movies that I did for Movie Pastor, gave a reflection on. Has a lot to do with what home looks like. What makes a home a home? What makes a world worth living in? Peninsula takes us through three kinds of homes. It starts off with a refugee lifestyle in Hong Kong, a group of people who are safe from zombies, but in the midst of at least what they experience as economic difficulty and oppression that they feel will be solved by the millions in American dollars that they are sent to pick up, if only they can brave the danger of the peninsula, the zombies back on the island of Korea. After a while, we enter back into that peninsula, and we meet the Unit 631. We meet this like conglomeration of survivors who are living together and engaging in weird gladiatorial style death matches. So they've got food, it's not great food. They've got entertainment. They've got a kind of raucous, hedonistic lifestyle built up. And they've got a modicum of safety. Like they're not immediately worried at their fortress being overrun, but not nearly as much safety as there was in Hong Kong. And we see just kind of that lifestyle, which I think connects with why a lot of people, why zombie movies are an escape for some of us. There's like a desire to live in a world where there are no rules anymore. Reminds me a little bit of The Island in Pinocchio, right? Like here's people who can just act however they want. And then we finally have a third home, which is this family home, where the father of the family has died. He's been abandoned by the main character in the opening act. And there is no safety. I mean, the sense of safety is just highly, highly reduced. We've got to send the small kids out to do stunt driving. There's very limited food. There's virtually no money, nothing in the way of worldly comforts. But there's a lot of love and togetherness, and there's our family, and they're with each other. And it puts into stark contrast back in Hong Kong. What did we think was the problem? We thought it was money, because actually our main character is just totally and completely alone, and even the people he's connected to or nearby, he's walled off emotionally from. And so over the plot of the film, there's the American dollars are a dead weight. I mean, they're just dangerous to be around. You can get them, but a whole lot of good you'll do. The guy who finally kind of brings them back to the boat to get the credit, to get the reward, gets immediately betrayed. Like, money's a liability. Turns out that's not going to get you what you need. But the family, when they escape together. They escape alive. The protagonist, the main character, makes the ultimate sacrifice and survives it, which I think is kind of brilliant. So he's willing to trade his life for the family, but doesn't need to, which is, I think, a really important question. What if there's such a thing as an opportunity to risk it all and not lose it all? And when's the right time to do that? And at the end of the movie, We get a line about the new world you're going into, and the kid who's been living in this third home says, "The world I came from wasn't so bad either." It all reminds me of this book, Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. It is an incredibly short book. I highly recommend picking it up. It's a quick read. Viktor Frankl was interned in a concentration camp, and because he was Jewish, and spent that time as a psychoanalyst pondering the nature of suffering and what it takes, what it is that makes life worth living, and he came to the conclusion that it's meaning. One of the phrases from the book that stands out as critical, as a thesis statement of sorts, is that a man who knows the why of life can endure almost any how. Knowing what you live for, knowing who you live for, knowing what's most important to you and what your life is for is more important than luxury or freedom or the ability to act like a jerk. None of that will ultimately make you happy, and it will actually make you sad, because then if you run into problems, if you run into disappointments, those disappointments will ruin anything. You won't have any capacity to endure the how of life because you don't know the why. But if you have meaning, if you have something that you're living for, someone that you're living for, then you can endure. And then even the hell that you're living in, like the hellscape of the peninsula that these kids were living in, can become a playground to you, really, truly. I think it's a beautiful sentiment. It, of course, does not stand to reduce, and Viktor Frankl would be the first to tell you, that doesn't mean there isn't suffering, or that doesn't mean that if you are suffering, all you need is a change of mindset. But it does mean that if we want to reduce suffering, the sort of mindset we ought to think about changing is the question of, what's your life really for? What are you living for? What's the why of your life? And that's a question that I think is also lifted to us by Peninsula. And given the answer, informed by Train to Busan, other people sharing, working together, sacrificing for others, living in community, not making it all about yourself. It's a good lesson.